Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Blair, also known as Bubbs. This is episode 222 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you all for joining me. As always, today we are joined by a special guest, Mike Bundt. Mike, thanks for coming on. How's it going, man?
Going good. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, I'm looking forward to getting into this Jets-Bills matchup, week number 11 of the 2023 NFL season. We were talking a little bit off air at how this game has really turned into an elimination game, but when you looked at it from the beginning of the season, we thought this would be a big matchup between two powerhouse offenses with Rodgers and Allen, and two teams that we thought would come to this game with an opportunity to take over, whether it's the AFC East or the AFC as a whole. But here we are. It is a 4-5 Jet team and a 500 Bills team. And I wanted just to get your thoughts here to start. The last time we talked, we were heading into week number 1. And since that point, both teams have dealt with a ton of injuries. The Bills have now gone through an offensive coordinator change. Bills doing with Trey White, Matt Milano, two key losses. Jets obviously lost Rodgers 4 plays into the season. On top of that, losing Elijah Vera Tucker, losing Al Woods, all 3 to torn Achilles. It's been a very unfortunate season. It's been a crazy, wild season. So what has been your thoughts on the Bills season as a whole? And then from an outside, the Jets, which has just been crazy since Rodgers went down 4 plays in.
Yeah, Bill season as a whole can be summed up in one word so far, and that's disaster. It's been a nightmare so far with this team. It got off to a good start. They were sitting at 4-2. Things were feeling good after they dismantled Miami by 28 points. Some people had them atop their power rankings, and then it kind of all fell apart the next week in London when the injuries just started flowing in. The Miami game, you had Trey White go down. That was obviously that hurt, but not the end of the world. But in London, they saw Daquan Jones and Matt Milano both go down, and Daquan was playing at an all-pro level. Matt Milano, a former all-pro. And we've really seen a big drop in the Bills' defense in the last month since those injuries hit. A unit that was in the top 3 in DVOA to a unit that's now 21st overall in that metric. Offensively, they're still in the top 5 in DVOA, and a lot of metrics still really like this offense, but they've been one of the worst first-half offenses in the NFL over the past month. And a term that Sean McDermott likes to use is complementary football. It's just not happening. The defense isn't creating takeaways. They're setting up in bad field position, and then their special teams has been bad as well. So you factor in all these struggles. It's just been a kind of a nightmare the past month where they saw their playoff odds drop from over 85% to now 19%. Not saying it can't happen, but it's been a big drop in the way they're playing, and they're losing all these one-score games. Every loss has been by 6 points or less. Then looking at the Jets from an outsider view, the Jets are pretty much where I thought they would be following the Aaron Rodgers injury. Obviously, a very difficult thing for you guys to deal with after all the offseason hype. I had the Jets as a playoff team going into the year. I thought they were one of the better teams in the AFC. I had the Bills still winning the AFC East preseason, but I thought the Jets would be one of the top 4 teams in the conference. If Aaron Rodgers was playing, I think that would be the case. Obviously, a lot of people are high on Miami right now, and I think the Dolphins deserve some of the hype. Their offense is impressive, but we've seen this Dolphins team every time they play one of the top teams in football, they lay an egg. They're a no-show. So anybody that would say that the Dolphins for sure would be the division leaders, even if Aaron Rodgers was playing, I think would be incorrect. The tough part I really have with the Jets is this. When you put all of your eggs in Aaron Rodgers, I kind of wish they would have had a better backup plan than Zach Wilson. And I understand the Zach Wilson they thought would be fine as a backup. That's okay. But once Aaron Rodgers goes down, there should have been urgency to bring someone else in and not tank the entire season at that point. You look at Minnesota bringing in a guy like Joshua Dobbs, who's been able to keep their season afloat, and not just keep it afloat, kind of elevate it since Kirk Cousins left. This Jets defense is special. They're good. And I can already think about a few games on the top of my head watching you guys in primetime situations lose games that probably could have won with slightly better quarterback play. Obviously, last week against the Raiders. So it's kind of a shame because I feel like for a second straight year, a great defense is being put to waste. And it reminds me a lot of some of the Bills teams in the early 2000s when they would have a number 2 or number 3 ranked defense and find a way to win only 6 games.
Yeah, you're spot on. That's I think that's been I think the most painful thing of this whole season is not just watching the offense because it's been so bad, but seeing a defense that is so good and so dominant go to waste. And you mentioned against the Raiders, a game we blew, even a game like the Patriots earlier in the season that we should have won if we had average quarterback play, and that ultimately falls on Douglas. A lot of fans, including myself, we were calling for a quarterback to be brought in behind Rodgers in June, in May. Just in case if something happened, and they didn't do it. And sure enough, here we are with Zach. The Trevor Siemian move was kind of to just send a message to the fan base like, oh, here's something, like here's a move, but we're never going to actually play him, which is unfortunate. But yeah, it's been a bumpy road for sure. And Zach he isn't improving. He's regressing in some areas, and it's been tough to watch. So moving back to the Bills here, obviously some news this week coming out of that Denver game. The firing of Ken Dorsey. They elevate Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. It's just an interesting situation. Kind of a two-part question here. Number one, are you on board with the Dorsey firing? Did you believe it was the right move? Or do you feel it's more Allen? And then kind of the second half of that is, do you feel Joe Brady, maybe not so much this week because it's such a short turnaround, but do you feel the rest of the way and into next season, whatever route they take with the coordinator position, do you feel he's going to get more out of Allen and maybe lessen the turnovers? What is your thoughts on the whole quarterback coordinator situation in Buffalo?
Yeah, so my view is I do think Ken Dorsey is kind of getting scapegoated as a result of all this, but at the same point, I am perfectly okay with the Bills moving on from him. It's one of those eye test versus analytics battles that there really is no definitive good answer. So the Bills are in the top 5 in almost every offensive metric that matters this year. They're third, I believe, in EPA. They're third in DVOA. They're good in third down conversion rate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of fans will tell you their numbers are a little bit off because they had a 3-game stretch where they averaged 43 points per game early in the season, while the last month they've been closer to 20 points per game. They've been one of the worst first half offenses in the league over the last 5 weeks. They've been good in the second half, but oftentimes that's playing from behind or playing out of necessity where they have to open things up at that point. It's tough because the smart football people will tell you that what's changed more so over the last 5 weeks hasn't been the Bills' offense, but the Bills' defense. And they've had the major drop, and that the Bills' offense is just struggling to score points, but they'll point to special teams being an issue, lack of takeaways, poor starting field position, and not as many field goals. So the tough part is the numbers say that Dorsey was doing decent, and last year they were a good offense as well. And there's one point in time when Dorsey had the top points per game in the NFL since his arrival through 20-something games in Buffalo. So it's tough to argue with that, but there has been issues with this offense. They have struggled to put points on the board. You saw it against Denver. That was nothing new. It's been at least 3, 4, 5 weeks. They didn't put a point on the board against the Giants until I believe the fourth quarter. It's been a brutal stretch of games. And when you watch it, is it Dorsey? Is it Allen? I think it was a combination of both. I'd put more blame on Dorsey because I think you need to have a better idea of who you have at quarterback. Josh is not someone that is going to always be the best scheme, make the right choice. He has this over-aggressive mentality where he wants to make big plays. It felt like the Bills coaching staff was holding him back. He wasn't running as much this year, not as much scrambling. Explosive plays were down dramatically. A lot of times it looked like wide receivers were jumbled in the same areas. It just the entire offense was out of sync. Now, There's Cover One film guys that will say that's a Dorsey issue. Now, Kurt Warner, on the other hand, was saying a lot of the concepts the Bills were running were things that you'll see among many of the better offenses in the league, and that maybe it's more just the play on the field. You have players not executing. Now, that's a lot of what the message from the players has been this week since Dorsey has been let go, was that we weren't doing our job. There were plays to be made. We weren't executing. It's on us. Like, we feel bad that Dorsey's gone because of us. But how is it going to now change that Joe Brady is the offensive coordinator? I don't know. I don't think this week and next week much will change. It's really hard to change much of your offense on a short notice. During their bye week after Philly, I think then you might start to see some larger things implemented. But I think for the time being, maybe you see some things changed in the script, the first 10, 15 plays of this game. Brady is known for being a little bit more aggressive passing, a little bit more spreading teams out. So maybe they try to let Josh go back to his bread and butter and just tell him, hey, be aggressive. Don't worry about mistakes. Do your thing. And we'll live and die with that. But other than that, it remains to be seen if there's going to be much changes in the near term.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting story to follow, and just an interesting. It's kind of all over the place when you like watch it, because there is blame to go around everywhere. But like Josh Allen, on the same hand, as you talked about, he can make almost any throw. He's on pace for 40 plus touchdowns. Got the 19 touchdowns, which is tied for the league lead. But he's also leading the league in interceptions. So it's kind of like he can do a lot of really good things, but he does have those mistakes that hurt the team and ultimately lose games. So when you look at this offense coordinator position, I know we're looking a little bit farther in the future, but just as kind of a quick follow-up question here, do you feel that if Brady does well enough and they find a rhythm and maybe they start to win some games and they get into the postseason, do you feel he'll be back, or do you think the Bills are just going to wipe the slate clean and bring in a new offensive staff in the offseason?
I think this is a legitimate 7-game trial run for Joe Brady. And the big reason why I never thought Dorsey would be fired earlier in the year when people were calling for it was because Joe Brady was the guy I knew would likely get the promotion if Dorsey was fired in season. And I didn't think enough would change to really warrant it. Now that they made this move, it kind of reeks of desperation. Of a lot of people are speculating maybe there was a relationship issue between Allen and Dorsey. I don't have any evidence to suggest that. I think more so this was, like I said, kind of scapegoating. Like, McDermott's looking out for himself, obviously. Offensive coordinator's not getting it done. So this kind of protects McDermott in a way. I think it's also kind of scapegoating the offense a little bit. Instead of having all the blame go to Allen or the passing attack for some of their recent struggles, you more so say, well, the offense coordinator is taking the fall for their lack of execution and whatnot. So at the end of the day, I think Brady will have a chance to earn this position. We all remember what he did at LSU with Joe Burrow in 2019, a historic year, the greatest college offense of all time, in my opinion, with Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. And he's had a year plus, close to 2 years of being an offensive coordinator in Carolina, only 34 years old, well-regarded. So I think if he does well, he absolutely can earn the job going forward, assuming that there's no crazier decisions made this offseason, like moving on from Sean McDermott, which I don't think is a realistic possibility at the moment, regardless of some of the heat that fans in Buffalo are starting to put on him.
Yeah, you mentioned McDermott. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, what are your overall thoughts on him since he's joined here? I know obviously Bills fans are kind of split. You hear some criticism, you hear some people that support him. Like, where do you stand with Sean McDermott and what he's done in Buffalo?
Yeah, I think Sean McDermott's a good coach. His record speaks for itself.
Yep.
One of the best records in the league since he took over in Buffalo. He ended their drought, guided a team with Tyrod Taylor as the starting quarterback to the playoffs. It was gutsy with Brandon Beane to select Josh Allen at a time when Allen was a polarizing prospect. Has consistently had top-ranked defenses in the league. I think this year he might have took a little bit too much on the plate. Whether they pushed Leslie Frazier out or if Frazier decided to go, regardless of what truly happened, McDermott chose to become the defensive coordinator on this team. And he had always kind of had some questionable in-game management with certain things. But now you have the defensive coordinator responsibilities on top of that. And then you see something like 12 men on the field in a critical moment. And you're just wondering, does he have the necessary time and resources to be able to focus on all the aspects he needs to right now? I think McDermott is a good coach. I think he's one of the better ones in the league, and that they should stick with him going forward. People always, when they look at firing coaches, think about how much better it can get, but it can also get a lot worse than what it is. And I think the one thing a lot of people in Buffalo that do want him gone worry about is they keep bringing up this guy took us to the AFC Championship game and 2 divisional rounds. Mm-hmm. But it seems like we're going in the wrong direction. There's fear that he'll never be able to take advantage of Josh Allen and get them to a Super Bowl and win it all. And, of course, there's the stat that when you have a coach and quarterback combo for like 6 or 7 years and they haven't won a Super Bowl, they've never won one after that point. So I think some people want change, a new face, an offensive guru to kind of get things back on track. And I'm not against that if they could get the right guy. I know Ben Johnson out of Detroit is a popular name right now, and I wouldn't be against those ideas. I just don't think it's a realistic thing right now when Brandon Beane is so close to McDermott personally. And McDermott was handpicked by the Bills owner, Terry Pegula, back in 2017. So I think it would take another bad year before that becomes a realistic possibility.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ben Johnson because that name with the Jets has been tossed around a little bit with some of the fans about like next year if Rodgers wants Saleh actually gone or wants change, although I don't think that'll happen. Potentially Ben Johnson, who obviously is doing great things over there in Detroit. So definitely be interesting to follow. So there has been some positives, obviously, with the Bills on the offense side of football. One guy I want to look at specifically is Dalton Kincaid, who earlier in the season wasn't getting as many opportunities. Dawson Knox obviously was the premier guy, and you never want to see an injury, but sometimes injuries can provide opportunities for other guys, and that has been the case here for Kincaid. What have been your thoughts? Do you feel that he's really starting to emerge as a true number 1 tight end? You guys took him out of Utah. He's got a ton of talent, and he's had a 5-6 game stretch of just really good football since he's been the number 1 guy.
Dalton Kincaid already is a number 1 tight end, and he's the Bills' number 1 tight end at this moment. Even when Dawson Knox comes back, that's not changing, and there's no reason to change it. You draft a tight end in the first round with his skill set for a reason. I believe at this moment in time, Kincaid is already a top 10 pass-catching tight end in the NFL. I think next year he might be a top 3 pass-catching tight end in the NFL. He's a rookie, and he's on pace for 77 catches for 670 yards. Not a ton of touchdowns, but he was barely even utilized the first half of the season, the first quarter of the season. So now we're starting to see him consistently get involved in this Bills offense. And I think he's going to be a huge impact player for years to come in Buffalo. So that's one of the few encouraging things that Bills fans have to look forward so far this year. Ben Kincaid, and then even Khalil Shakir, the Bills slot receiver, starting to emerge in recent weeks. So those are 2 of the bright spots alongside Stephon Diggs. And that's kind of the frustrating thing, because Bills fans are looking at some of these emerging targets and they're wondering, why can't we put points on the board?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost similar to with the Jets with like Garrett Wilson, and he's putting up all these numbers, but we can't score. But it's, Kincaid actually saved my fantasy football season because I had Waller and he was struggling. I picked up Kincaid and he's been really good. So he's been a lot of fun to watch. So once again, we're talking to Mike Bundt. Moving on over to the defensive side of football here for Buffalo. We talked a little bit about the beginning with the injuries to Matt Milano and Trey White, 2 devastating injuries, especially for Trey White. He just came off of the ACL a couple years ago, was fully coming back to tear an Achilles like that is obviously horrible. And Milano is the heart and soul of that defense. Missing him has been a tough blow. But One guy I wanted to, kind of get your thoughts on is Terrell Bernard, who's actually, since Milano's went down, has emerged for you guys and has played really well. What has been your thoughts on him, stepping up in a bigger role?
Yeah, Bernard is a stud already. I don't know what his PFF grade or how other people have him
Yeah.
graded out in the metrics, but Bernard instantly has come in and has made an impact on this Bills defense. He has great instincts. He is good and solid in coverage. I don't want to say he's a Milano in coverage, but he's solid in coverage, and he's been making plays on the ball. Coming out of college, this guy probably could have been a first-round pick if he had prototypical middle linebacker size. He's a smaller guy, but he makes up for it by being a tremendous athlete and knowing where to be at the right time. The thought process going into the year was there was concern because he didn't play much as a rookie, and he was an unknown commodity. But the one thing that we were always told while I was at Cover One was that the Bills coaching staff was high on him, and it's pretty clear why they were high on him based on what he's shown so far this season. Multiple interceptions, already had a multi-sack game earlier this year against Washington. He's someone that Bills fans should be excited about for years to come at the middle linebacker position.
Yeah, definitely an emerging player for sure, and has been another guy to look out for this Jets offense as they approach this game on Sunday. Another piece I want to talk about on this defense has been an interesting conversation too, I think, around Bills fans with some of the offense stuff. He's been in some of the criticism as well as Von Miller. What have been your thoughts on Von Miller? I know I've heard obviously a lot of criticism, but like, what is your thoughts? Do you feel he's just not the same player? Do you feel it's a little bit of the injuries he's dealt with? What do you feel it is with Von Miller and your overall thoughts on his play?
He's clearly not the same player anymore. Like, he hasn't made an impact at all this year. He's barely done anything. Now the question is that because time has finally caught up to him and it's over for him, or is this coming back from an ACL injury a little bit quicker than he should have and still trying to ramp up to where he needs to be? If it's time has caught up to him, then the Bills are in tons of trouble with his contract going forward. Where eventually they'll probably have to eat some dead cap and just move on from him. The way it's set up, they have to keep him next year. There's no moving on from him next year. And there's a possibility they might need to keep him for 4 years total. So they're praying that eventually something clicks and he returns to normal, which is kind of a shame because he was still playing at a super high level last year before tearing his ACL for the second time in his career. But right now, limited snap rotation and just does not have that burst and that bend that Bills fans and Rams fans and Broncos fans are accustomed to seeing. And it's hurting the defense. Now, the good news is they have other guys at DN that can make up for it. Greg Rousseau has had a good season. Leonard Floyd entered Monday night with 7 sacks. AJ Epineza now up to 6 sacks. So they have other guys on the edges that can get to the quarterback. But when you invest all the money that they invested in Von Miller, they definitely were hoping for better results than what they're seeing to this point.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's Leonard Floyd is another guy. Was like you said, out of the Rams. Funny because you thought like Von Miller coming out of the Rams was the big name, but come to find out, the signing out of the Rams that was really made the impact has been Leonard Floyd. He's put together a really nice season. So moving on here to the secondary. Again, we talked a little bit about the Trey White injury. How do you feel they've dealt with that so far? And who do you expect, or how do you expect them to defend this team specifically going up against Garrett Wilson?
So Trey White, that injury obviously hurt. Now they recently got Rasul Douglas, who is a good player and arguably was having a better season than Trey White before coming to Buffalo. Last week missed Micah Hyde, who was out hurt. Don't know the status of him this week yet. Poyer and Hyde, they've been one of the best safety tandems in the league for the last 5 years. They are getting a little bit older. Quickness was never their thing. It was more smarts and intangibles, but it does seem like maybe they're starting to lose a little bit of a step overall. Next to Rasul Douglas, you have Christian Benford, who's been an impressive second-year player out of Villanova, former 6th-round pick. He's been solid. Dane Jackson's their number 3 corner now with Rasul Douglas in the mix. Jackson is limited upside, but he's decent. They know they can rely on him. He's all right overall. The defense, I feel like, while you would think losing a guy like Trey would kill the secondary, I feel like it's still a solid secondary overall for the most part. Even Taron Johnson is a solid player, even though he had the DPI with under 30 seconds to go against the Broncos on the Monday night that set up the game-winning field goal. But I would say the two biggest losses, they're not Trey. It would be Milano and Daquan Jones. Milano because he just probably one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL, always in the right spot, has the instincts. Losing that in the middle of the field has just been devastating for the Bills. They're getting torn up in those areas now. And Daquan Jones was a double team magnet. He attracted all the double teams, and he also had one of the best double team win rates in the NFL. He was a great pass rush win rate. So losing him, it's opened up the defensive line a little bit to where Ed Oliver was asked to do more, and Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips were stepping up and honestly playing near the bottom of the league D tackle wise. So they have Linval Joseph now in the rotation. That helps a little bit. But how are the Bills going to defend Garrett Wilson? Well, I think a little bit when you go up against Garrett Wilson, you pray, because Garrett Wilson is that good. And if he had an even middle of the pack quarterback throwing to him right now, I think Garrett Wilson would be a top 5 to 10 receiver in the NFL. I know that he isn't at that point right now in the discussion, but I think right behind the Diggs, the Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hills, I think Garrett Wilson is right in that next group of receivers, right behind those guys. So I have super high praise for him. And I think sometimes with the Garrett Wilson, you just hope to contain more so than anything else.
Yeah, definitely. He's a guy that certainly would have benefited from Rodgers big time, but he's still putting up 80, 90 yards a game and finding ways to do it with Zach, which is not easy to do. So as we start to close things out here, looking at the team as a whole here, what do you feel are some of the X factors on offense and defense for the Bills to for some of the X factors in defense on the Bills to take down the Jets this weekend?
So my expectation for what the Jets are going to do or try to do against the Bills is I think they're going to try to run the ball a lot. I don't think the Jets are going to throw it much. I think the Jets are going to want the clock to continue rolling, and that's regardless of if they score or don't score. The strategy against the Bills has been just let that clock bleed, limit their offensive possessions, because the Bills have been so bad in the first half of these games, and it seems like they have the anti-clutch gene this year, to where even when they take the lead late in the games, their defense has been ruining it and can't hold on. So I think the Jets are going to try to pound the rock. So my X factors are basically, can this Bills defensive line take care of business? Because if things are sloppy and ugly out there, that's going to make life difficult on Terrell Bernard. Bernard needs lanes to be able to attack and shoot gaps and make tackles. We saw game one, the Bills struggled against the Jets run game at times, which created some plays. I'm not overly worried about Zach Wilson, the passer, in this game. We even saw Russell Wilson against the Bills. It wasn't Wilson that beat the Bills. It was the clock kept turning, and the Bills made mistakes on offense that gave the Broncos shorter fields. So I don't think the Jets are going to suddenly find a way to score 20-plus points. I think this is another one of those games where the Jets score 17 to 20 points. The question I have, and this is the most obvious X factor in the world, it's Josh Allen. What type of performance do we see from Josh? Because when the best of the best are on, it doesn't matter what the defense does. They can make up for it, and they can get by. Like, it doesn't matter what you do against Patrick Mahomes. If he's on, he's beating you. Like, he's going to score against you. And what I think we've seen a little bit too much from Josh Allen is a lack of patience at times, an over willingness to make the aggressive play, even when it wasn't the right play on the field. We saw it week one on Monday Night Football. The Jets never should have beat the Bills on that Monday Night Football game. Josh Allen handed the game to them. And really, I joked about it after the game. You could have put me at quarterback in that second half, and the Bills would have won the game because I would have handed the ball off every single play the rest of the game. And it would have prevented the Jets from ever having good field position and getting in that position. But the one thing New York they always have an answer for Josh. Josh has struggled against the Jets for the betterment of the last couple of years. The Jets give him problems. And I don't expect that to change on Sunday. I think the Bills offense is going to have their struggles. Even if Joe Brady does open things up, the Jets in 2022 were the best defense in the NFL against 11 personnel. I don't think this is a great matchup. The Bills, one of the things that they've done decently this year is run the ball, but we saw week one that they struggled to really run the ball on the Jets defense. So if the Bills are going to have success offensively in this game, it's going to be because Josh started playing within himself more and stopped thinking he needs to be this hero. He needs to be this all-star Pro Bowl quarterback. Get Dalton Kincaid involved. Get Khalil Shakir involved. Don't try to force feed Stephon Diggs just because you want to get Stephon Diggs the ball. I know Diggs had quality numbers week one against the Jets, but a lot of that was on tight coverage plays. The way things are going right now, tight coverage throws, those are going to end up in interceptions with the luck the Bills have right now. So yeah, my two X factors, my two keys to the game is Josh Allen to play smart football, limit his turnovers, and for the Bills defensive line to find a way to stop the Jets running game. Because if the Jets are able to get 4, 5, 6 yards per carry, they're going to be able to keep the ball moving and create some issues for this Bills defense.
Yeah, definitely. That seems to be the story of the Jets. Your assessment of them is spot on about they're going to run it, and just keep running it. And I would like to see Hackett to get a little bit more creative on their run plays, but I'm not fully expecting that because they haven't done it for 9 weeks now. So,
but it's in Buffalo. We know what you're going through.
Yeah, definitely. It's like when you're watching, I know obviously you experienced it, but when you're watching that game Sunday, you'll be able to tell exactly when they're running the ball because it's so predictable. It runs up the middle. There's no counters. There's no pitches. It's all boring. I would like to see them to try and get Breece Hall on a wheel route, a couple wheel route opportunities because they did it last year and he had a couple really big explosive plays. So I'm expecting a low scoring defensive game for the Jets and the Bills. What is your prediction and who do you got coming out on top?
So I hate making predictions right now because I feel like this has been my worst year making predictions of my life. But I'll say the Bills 20-17. I think being at home gives them a slight advantage. I don't think they're going to go off against this Jets defense, even with the coordinator change. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe the change will spark the Bills offense. There has been a little talk about them having a little more spunk in practice this week. If anything, maybe this is Josh Allen realizing I just got a guy fired because of my play on the field the last month. So maybe that wakes something up in Josh. Maybe he feels a little bit more relaxed and comfortable now as a result of this. But overall, I think this should be a close game. Whoever gets the first touchdown of this game, I think is going to have a huge advantage because I really do believe this is going to be a battle of the defenses, mostly because the Jets defense is so good. And then on the other hand, I think the Jets offense is so poor that it doesn't matter who the Bills defense is right now at this moment in time. So we'll see how it plays out. As we said off the show, this kind of feels like an elimination game. Obviously, neither team has great playoff odds at the current moment. But if the Jets can win this, at least continues the possibilities of where they can play into maybe late November and still feel like they're in the race of things with a couple games against Miami coming up. While with the Bills, they're looking at this as your next 3 games are after the Jets are Philadelphia on the road, by Kansas City on the road, then Dallas at home. You essentially need to they essentially need to beat the Jets, split Philly and Kansas City, and beat Dallas, and then hope to basically take care of business down the stretch. No worse than 5-2 to make the playoffs. So I doubt Jim Nantz and Tony Romo and the CBS executives who had this game at 425 before the season thought that this would be the case But here we are, and it's not even like it's December like 10th. Like
Yeah.
we have 7 games left in the season, and this game feels super critical, which is really sad for both teams.
Yeah, definitely. And for, as you mentioned, for you guys, this is hugely important because this is your last like really, really winnable game because our offense is so bad. I look at it as we have an offense that can lose to anybody, but we have a defense that can beat anybody. And that's the unfortunate reality. And yeah, I'd probably agree. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I don't think the Jets will win this Sunday. They haven't won in Buffalo since 2019, the last week of the season when you guys were benching your starters and we were able to pick up our 7th win. Um, it would be a very Jet thing to do, though, to win this game and then beat Miami and then lose to the Falcons at home. That would be a very Jet thing to do because they like to do that. But we'll see. Just got to take week by week. But a massive game up in Orchard Park, and we'll see how it all plays out. So to close everything out, where can everybody find you?
Well, they can find me on Twitter at Mike_Bundt. I have a ton of Buffalo sports takes, Bills, Sabres, college basketball, and just general stuff overall. I tweet about anything NFL related. Used to be a podcaster, sports anchor. So I have a lot of hot takes out there. And I'm not one of those Bills fans that's always just going to be a homer and say how great the Bills are and how amazing they are and slam the competition. I do respect this Jets team. Thought they were a playoff team before the year, and do think it's going to be a good game on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, definitely. Should be a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on. Enjoyed talking all things about Jets Bills heading into this matchup on Sunday. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. As always, hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for listening.